"Sir, they kidnapped my sister in a red van," the little boy cried. Then a Hell's Angel took off after them. Rain tapped against the windows of the Blue Star Diner like small fingers asking to come inside. Jack Mercer sat in the corner booth, the one closest to the door, the one nobody else wanted. He always sat there. Old habits died hard, and one habit that never left him was knowing where the exits were. His leather vest was still damp from the ride over. The patch on the front, worn and cracked from years of sun and rain, marked him as a Hell's Angel. His arms were covered in tattoos that told the story of a life he was not proud of anymore. Faded ink, old names, a skull here, a snake there. Things a younger, angrier Jack thought meant something. Now they just meant he got stared at. The diner was small, the kind of place with red vinyl booths and a chalkboard menu that never changed. Only a handful of customers sat scattered around the room. An older couple by the window, a tired-looking trucker at the counter, a mother with 2 kids in the back booth, watching Jack like he might stand up and start trouble at any second. He didn't blame them for staring. He used to give people plenty of reasons to be afraid. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. Jack wrapped his rough, scarred hands around a coffee mug and let the steam warm his face. He had just come from Miller's Auto, where he'd spent the last 4 hours fixing old Mrs. Higgins' truck for free. She was 78 years old and living on a fixed income, and there was no way Jack was going to let her pay $200 for a fuel pump when he could do it himself with parts from his own garage. Nobody in town knew he did things like that. He preferred it that way. Quiet acts. No audience. The waitress, a heavyset woman named Donna, who had been serving coffee at the Blue Star for 20 years, refilled his mug without being asked. She was one of the few people in town who didn't flinch when he walked in. "Storm's getting worse," she said, glancing towards the window. "You planning on riding home in that?" "Waiting it out," Jack said. His voice was low and rough, like gravel under boots. Donna nodded and moved on. Jack watched the rain streak down the window glass, thinking about nothing in particular, letting his mind rest for the first time all day. That was when the door burst open. The bell above it clanged hard against the frame. Wind and rain rushed inside, scattering napkins off the counter. Every head in the diner turned. A small boy stood in the doorway, soaked from head to toe. He couldn't have been more than 7 years old, his shoes squishing water onto the tile floor, his lips trembling, his chest heaving like he had been running for miles. His eyes were wide and wild with fear. In his small hand, he clutched something tight against his chest. A bracelet. Pink and purple threads, tied with care. A name stitched into the fabric. Lily. The boy's eyes swept across the diner, past the old couple, past the trucker, past the mother with her children. They landed on Jack. Something about the boy's face changed the moment he saw him. Not fear this time. Recognition. Desperation. He ran. His small feet slapped against the wet floor as he sprinted straight toward Jack's booth, ignoring the stairs, ignoring Donna calling out to ask if he was all right. He crashed into the edge of the table, breathing hard, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the rain. "Sir," his voice cracked, barely above a whisper, then rising into a desperate cry. "Sir, please!" Jack set his coffee down slowly. He leaned forward, his massive frame suddenly gentle, his voice calm despite the alarm rising in his chest. "Hey now," Jack said softly. "What's wrong, son?" The boy's hands shook as he held up the bracelet, showing Jack the name stitched into the thread like it was proof of something urgent, something real. They kidnapped my sister, Eli sobbed, his small body trembling. In a red van? Please, sir, you have to help me. Nobody believes me. The entire diner went silent. Forks stopped moving. Donna froze mid-step, coffee pot still in her hand. Every eye in the room turned toward the booth in the corner, toward the tattooed biker and the terrified little boy who had run straight into his arms for help. Jack slid out of the booth and knelt down on one knee, bringing himself level with the boy instead of towering over him. He had learned a long time ago that fear grows bigger when you look up at something. He didn't want to be one more big, scary thing in this kid's life. "Look at me," Jack said, his voice low and steady. "You're safe right now. I need you to breathe for me. Can you do that?" Eli nodded, chest still heaving, but he sucked in a shaky breath and held it the way you might hold a rope you didn't want to let go of. "Good," Jack said. "Now tell me your name." "Eli." His voice cracked. "Eli Carter." "Okay, Eli, I'm Jack." He kept his eyes locked on the boys, ignoring the whispers starting up behind him, ignoring Donna hovering nearby with the coffee pot still in her hand. "Tell me about your sister." Eli's fingers tightened around the bracelet like it was the only solid thing left in the world. "Lily. She's 10. She was walking home from school today, same way she always does. I was supposed to meet her at the corner by Miller's grocery, but she never came." His lips trembled again. "I found this on the ground by the mailbox. It's hers. She never takes it off. Never." Jack held out his hand, palm up, and Eli placed the bracelet into it like he was handing over something sacred. The threads were still damp from the rain, pink and purple, a little girl's careful stitching spelling out her own name. "There was a van," Eli continued, the words spilling out faster now. "A red one. Mrs. Peterson next door said she saw it stop on our street this morning. Nobody believes me. I told the police lady already and she said maybe Lily just wandered off somewhere. But Lily doesn't wander off. She always comes home. Always." Jack studied the boy's face. He had seen a lot of liars in his life, men who could look you dead in the eye and spin a story smooth as silk. This wasn't that. This was raw, unfiltered fear, the kind you couldn't fake if you tried. "I believe you," Jack said. Eli blinked like he hadn't expected those words. "You do?" "I do." Jack closed his hand gently around the bracelet, then handed it back to the boy. "And I'm going to help you find her." Behind him, the diner had gone still, the kind of silence that pressed on your ears. Jack could feel eyes on his back, the mother with her children pulling them closer, the old couple by the window murmuring low. He knew what they were thinking. A man like him, mixed up in something like this, was going to make people nervous, but none of that mattered right now. A little girl was missing, and a scared boy needed somebody to believe him. Jack stood, his knees popping from years of hard living, and looked down at Eli. "You got a phone I can use? Or is your mama nearby?" "She's at work. She doesn't know yet. I ran here first." Eli's voice cracked again. "I didn't know where else to go." "You did the right thing," Jack said. He pulled his own phone from his jacket pocket, the case scratched and worn, and dialed a number he knew by heart. "Bear, it's Jack. I need you, Doc and Ray, at the diner. Now. We got a missing kid, 10 years old, name of Lily Carter. Red van involved." He paused, listening. "No, I'm not messing around. Get here fast." He hung up and looked back at Eli, whose eyes were wide with something new now. Not just fear. Hope, fragile and flickering. "But there. We're going to find your sister," Jack said. "You're coming with me, and you're going to tell me everything you remember. Every little detail matters." Donna finally set the coffee pot down and came around the counter, wrapping a jacket around Eli's shivering shoulders. "Take care of him, Jack." she said quietly, and there was something different in her voice now. Not fear. Trust. Jack nodded once, then guided Eli toward the door. Rain still hammered against the windows, but Jack didn't care about the weather anymore. Somewhere out there, a 10-year-old girl was missing, and a red van was the only clue they had. He pushed open the diner door, Eli close beside him, and stepped out into the storm. The garage smelled like motor oil and rain by the time Jack pulled his truck through the open bay door, Eli sitting close beside him on the bench seat, still wrapped in Donna's borrowed jacket. The place was Jack's second home. Rows of tools hung neat on the walls, 3 motorcycles in various states of repair sitting under work lights, and an old couch shoved against the back wall that had seen better decades. Tom Bear Dawson was already there, his massive frame filling the doorway like he'd been poured into it. Despite his size, his face was soft with worry, the same look he got whenever one of the neighborhood kids scraped a knee. Mike Doc Reynolds sat on a stool near the workbench, arms crossed, his sharp eyes taking in everything the moment Jack's truck rolled in. Ray Collins leaned against the wall near the tool chest, quiet as always, but his gaze flicked straight to Eli and stayed there. "This the boy?" Bear asked, voice gentle despite his size. "This is Eli," Jack said, helping the kid down from the truck. "His sister Lily is missing, 10 years old, last seen walking home from school. There's a red van involved, and I don't like the smell of it." Doc was on his feet immediately, moving toward Eli with the calm, practiced steadiness of a man who'd spent years treating soldiers in worse conditions than a garage. He knelt down, same as Jack had done in the diner. "Hey there, buddy. I'm Doc. You cold? You want a blanket?" Eli shook his head, though he was shivering. "I want my sister." "We know," Doc said softly. "We're gonna help find her. But first I need to check you over. Make sure you're okay. That all right?" Eli nodded, and Doc got to work checking his pulse, looking at his eyes, making sure the boy wasn't in shock. While he worked, Jack pulled Bear and Ray aside near the workbench, keeping his voice low. "Kid says a red van was seen on his street this morning. Neighbor confirmed it. Cops are treating it like a runaway case, not taking it serious." Bear's jaw tightened. "That's their first mistake." "I need eyes on every road near that school," Jack said. "Every route a van could have taken. Ray, you know those back roads better than anybody. I want to know what's out there. Old properties, dirt roads, anywhere a van could disappear to." Ray nodded, already pulling a folded map from his jacket pocket, spreading it across the workbench. He didn't waste words. He never did. His finger traced the road that ran past the elementary school, then fanned out toward the wooded areas on the edge of town. "There's maybe a dozen ways out from that corner. Some of them lead to old farms, ones that got abandoned years back." "Start there," Jack said. "Doc, you're with me. Bear, I need you working the phones, calling in anybody else who will ride with us. We need eyes everywhere." Bear didn't hesitate. He never did when Jack called. None of them did. They'd all seen enough of Jack's life to know he didn't ask for help, unless it mattered. He'd bailed them out of worse spots than this without a second thought, and now it was their turn to show up. "Say the word," Bear said, already pulling out his phone. Jack looked over at Eli, who was watching everything with wide, tired eyes, still clutching that damp bracelet in his small fist. The boy looked so much smaller now, surrounded by 3 grown men who could crush a car door with their bare hands, but who were all bending over backward, trying to make him feel safe. Jack walked over and knelt down again, meeting Eli at eye level like he had back at the diner. "Listen to me," Jack said. "We're going to go check every road near your school. We're going to talk to people, look for that van, and we are not going to stop until we find your sister. You understand me?" Eli's chin trembled, but he nodded. "I need you to be brave a little while longer," Jack continued. "Can you do that?" "Yes, sir," Eli whispered. Jack put a hand on the boy's shoulder, firm and warm. "We're going to bring Lily home. I promise you that." Behind him, Ray folded the map and tucked it under his arm. Bear was already dialing numbers, and Doc grabbed his medical bag from the shelf. The garage, quiet just minutes before, now hummed with purpose. Night came down over the town like a heavy blanket, the rain finally slowing to a drizzle. Jack's headlight cut through the mist as he rode slow down Maple Street, Doc following close behind on his own bike, their engines the only sound on the empty road. They stopped at the corner near the elementary school first. A woman was out on her porch, pulling in a potted plant before the weather got worse. She froze when she saw the 2 motorcycles pull up, her hand tightening on the flower pot. Jack cut his engine and held up both hands, slow and easy. "Ma'am, sorry to bother you. We're looking for a missing girl. 10 years old, dark hair, walks home from the elementary school most days. You seen anything unusual around here today? Maybe a red van?" The woman's face changed the moment she heard the words, "missing girl." Fear turned into something softer. Worry. "A red van," she repeated. Yeah, I saw one. Came through here around 3, maybe 3:30. Drove real slow past the school. I thought maybe it was somebody's parent, but it didn't stop at the pickup line. Just kept rolling by real slow, then turned down toward the old highway." Doc pulled out a small notepad and wrote it down. "You catch anything about the driver? Anything at all?" "Not really. Just a man. Baseball cap, I think. Sorry, I wasn't paying that close attention." "You've helped more than you know," Jack said. "Thank you." They kept moving, house to house, stopping anyone still outside in the drizzle. A teenager walking his dog remembered seeing the van, too, parked near the tree line by the school fence for almost 20 minutes before driving off. An older man sweeping his porch said he'd seen it turn down Route 9, the road that curled out past the edge of town toward the empty farmland nobody used anymore. Each piece added up. The picture was getting clearer, and Jack didn't like what he was seeing. By the time they met back up with Bear and Ray at the crossroads outside town, night had fully settled in. Bear had brought 2 more riders with him, men Jack had known for 15 years, both quiet and steady, both ready to do whatever was needed. Ray sat on his bike, studying the map under a small flashlight, comparing it to notes he'd scratched into the margins. 3 different people saw the van heading toward Route 9, Jack said, swinging off his bike. Slow moving, driver in a cap, didn't stop for kids, didn't act normal. Ray nodded slowly. "That lines up. There's an old dirt road branches off Route 9, maybe 2 miles down. Used to be farmland out there before everybody sold off and moved on. Barely anybody goes out that way anymore." "How barely?" Doc asked. "Barely enough that if you wanted somewhere quiet, that'd be it," Ray said. Jack felt something tighten in his chest. He thought of Eli back at the garage with Bear's wife, Donna, sitting on that old couch, waiting for news, still clutching his sister's bracelet like it was the only thing keeping him steady. "Show me," Jack said. They rode out together, engines rumbling low through the dark, following Route 9, until the streetlights disappeared behind them and the road narrowed to 2 cracked lanes swallowed by trees on both sides. Ray slowed near a bend where the asphalt gave way to gravel, then cut his engine and knelt down at the edge of the road, shining his flashlight along the ground. "Here," he said. Jack walked over, and there in the mud, plain as day, were tire tracks. Deep ones, fresh ones, cutting off the gravel and heading down a narrow dirt path that disappeared into a stretch of dark woods. the kind of path most people wouldn't even notice unless they were looking for it. Bear crouched beside Ray, running his fingers along the edge of one track. Same width as a van tire, and it's recent. Rain hasn't washed it out yet. Doc looked up at the tree line, then back at Jack. This road go anywhere? Ray straightened up, folding his flashlight closed. Leads back to the old Hayes property. Nobody's lived out there in years. Jack stared down that dark path, feeling the weight of it settle into his gut. Whatever was waiting at the end of that road, it wasn't going to be simple. Morning light came in weak and gray through the garage windows, the kind of light that comes after a storm when the sky still can't decide if it wants to clear up. Jack hadn't slept. He'd spent the night going over every detail in his head. The tire tracks, the dirt road, the name Hayes rattling around in his mind like a loose bolt. By the time the sun came up, he was already at the garage, a cold cup of coffee sitting untouched on his workbench. Eli was there too. Donna had brought him over first thing, saying the boy hadn't slept much either, just kept asking when Jack was coming back. Now he sat on the same old couch from the night before, still wearing yesterday's clothes, his small hands folded in his lap like he was trying to hold himself together. Jack pulled a stool over and sat down across from him, keeping his voice soft and even. "Hey, bud, you holding up okay?" Eli shrugged, but his eyes were red and tired. "I keep thinking about her. Lily hates being scared. She acts brave, but she gets scared easy. She used to make me sleep with the hall light on when she was scared. Not me." Jack nodded slowly. He understood that kind of fear, the kind you carry for someone else instead of yourself. "We found some tracks last night. A road that might lead somewhere. We're going to check it out today, but first, I want you to help me with something." That got Eli's attention. He sat up a little straighter. "Help? Like a real detective?" "Like a real detective," Jack said. "Sometimes the smallest things tell us the biggest stuff. You still got that bracelet?" Eli reached into his jacket pocket and pulled it out, holding it like it was made of glass. It was a simple thing. Colored thread braided together with little wooden beads, spelling out Lily along the center. The threads were faded in some spots, worn soft from being touched so many times. "She made this herself," Eli said, turning it over in his hands. "Last summer. She made one for herself and one for me, but I lost mine at the lake. She let me have hers instead. Said sisters are supposed to share." His voice cracked a little. "She never takes it off. Not ever. Not even in the shower." Jack leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "That's a good sister right there." "She's the best," Eli whispered. Jack held out his hand, careful and slow. "Mind if I take a real close look? Sometimes things get stuck on stuff without us noticing." Eli placed the bracelet in Jack's rough palm, like he was handing over something sacred. Jack turned it gently under the garage light, studying each bead, each knot in the thread. It looked ordinary at first, just a kid's homemade bracelet, worn and soft from years of wear. Then he saw it. Caught in the clasp, tangled tight in the knot where the bracelet had been torn free, was a small scrap of fabric. Red fabric. Thin, almost like a piece of canvas or tarp material, the kind you might find lining the inside of an old work van. It was barely bigger than a fingernail, but it was there, snagged and twisted into the thread like it had ripped away in a struggle. Jack's chest went tight. He held it up closer to the light, turning it slow between his fingers. "Eli," he said quietly. "This scrap of fabric, you ever seen anything like this before? Maybe on something at home, or something Lily was wearing?" Eli leaned in, squinting at it. He shook his head. "No, sir. That's not from anything we got." Jack looked back at the fabric again, his mind racing. Red. Rough. Torn. Exactly the kind of material you'd find inside a van, the kind that could tear loose if someone grabbed onto something while being pulled away. He set the bracelet down gentle on the workbench, careful not to disturb the thread, and looked up at Eli with a steady, serious expression. "Bud," he said, "I think we just found our first real clue." Bear's truck rattled down the gravel road, 3 motorcycles trailing behind it like a small, loud parade. Jack rode at the front, the wind cutting cold against his face, the scrap of red fabric tucked safe in his vest pocket. He had called Sarah Bennett before dawn, and now her patrol car followed behind the bikes, lights off, but ready. The road narrowed the farther they went, weeds growing tall between the tire ruts. Nobody had driven this way in years, except for the fresh tracks cutting through the mud. Jack had seen those same tracks the night before, pressed deep and clear near the wooded turnoff. Now they led straight to a rusted metal gate, hanging crooked on one hinge. Bear pulled the truck to a stop. Doc climbed out first, his eyes already scanning the property with the same careful attention he used to give wounded soldiers. Ray was quiet as always, walking the fence line slow, studying the ground like it might speak to him if he listened close enough. "This is Hayes's old place," Sarah said, stepping out of her car and pulling her jacket tight against the wind. "Or it used to be. Nobody's lived here in over a year." The farmhouse stood at the end of a long dirt driveway, paint peeling off the boards, windows dark and empty like closed eyes. Behind it sat a big barn, its wood gray and weathered, one wall leaning slightly like it might give up standing at any moment. Jack's stomach tightened as they walked closer. Something about the quiet felt wrong. Not peaceful quiet. Waiting quiet. "Barn first," Jack said. The doors groaned when Doc pulled them open, hinges crying out after years without oil. Inside, the air smelled thick, of animals, of fear, of something that had been kept hidden too long. Cages lined the walls, dozens of them, stacked 2 and 3 high, made of wire and rusted metal. Some were empty, doors hanging open. Others still had blankets inside, food bowls licked clean, water bottles dripping slow. A few cages were small enough for kittens, others big enough for full-grown dogs. "Somebody's been running an operation here," Doc said quietly, crouching down to look at one of the empty cages. And not a small one. Ray walked the length of the barn, his flashlight cutting through the dusty air. He stopped near the back wall, where boxes of pet supplies sat stacked in neat rows, leashes, collars, bags of dog food, vaccination records with names scratched out and rewritten. "They were selling them," Ray said. "Look at this." He held up a folder, papers spilling out. Fake adoption forms. Different names. Different addresses. All fake. All made to look legitimate to anyone who didn't look too close. Sarah's face went pale as she flipped through the papers. "This isn't rescue work. This is theft. Stolen pets, resold to unsuspecting families." Jack's jaw tightened. His mind raced back to Eli sitting on the couch, to Lily's bracelet, to the torn scrap of red fabric. If this was the kind of place Lily had been taken to, if she had been dragged into this mess just to disappear into a stack of cages like the animals around them. He felt sick. "We need to find her," Jack said, his voice low and hard. "Now!" They spread out through the barn, checking every corner, every stall, every shadow. Bear found an old backpack shoved behind a stack of hay bales, the fabric torn at one strap. Jack recognized it instantly. Lily's backpack. Eli had described it to him the night before, dark blue with a small keychain shaped like a dog clipped to the zipper. Jack knelt down, hands shaking slightly as he unzipped the front pocket. Inside was a folded piece of notebook paper, the edges soft and worn like it had been handled many times. He unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was small, careful, clearly a child's. "I think he is helping them. I need to make sure the puppies are safe." Jack read it twice, his heart pounding hard against his ribs. "Sarah," he said, holding the note up. "She wasn't taken." Sarah stepped closer, reading over his shoulder, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. "She went with him," Jack said quietly. "On her own." The barn went silent, except for the wind rattling the loose boards above them. Everyone stood still, processing what that meant, the story shifting beneath their feet like ground giving way. Lily hadn't been kidnapped. She had followed the van herself, believing she was helping someone do something good. Jack folded the note back along its worn creases, careful like it might tear apart if he wasn't gentle enough. His fingers were not shaking now. They were steady, with purpose. "Read that again," Sarah said. "Out loud. I want to make sure I heard it right." Jack cleared his throat. "I think he is helping them. I need to make sure the puppies are safe." Bear had come up beside them, his big shoulders blocking out the gray light from the barn door. He read the words on Jack's face before Jack even had to explain. She thought she was doing something good. "She saw something," Jack said. "Before all this, before the cages, before the fake papers, she saw a man doing something kind." Doc crouched near the backpack, going through the rest of its contents with careful hands, the way he used to check a wounded soldier for injuries that weren't visible right away. He pulled out a torn piece of paper towel, a granola bar wrapper, a small flashlight with a cracked lens. "She packed like she was planning something," Doc said. "This wasn't some kid getting snatched off the sidewalk. She made a choice." Jack stood up slow, his knees popping from the years of hard living catching up to him. He looked around the barn again, at the cages stacked 3 high, at the smell of fear still hanging in the air, even though most of the animals were gone. "Picture it," Jack said. "Lily's walking home. She sees a van pulled over. Maybe the driver's got a hurt dog in his arms, wrapping it up gentle, talking soft to it like it matters. A 10-year-old girl who loves animals more than anything. She's not going to walk past that. She's going to stop." "And then what?" Sarah asked. "She just climbs in?" "Not right away," Ray said, speaking up from the back of the barn where he'd been studying tire tracks pressed deep into the dirt floor. He walked over, boots quiet on the old wood. "She probably followed on foot first, maybe more than once. Kids like her, they don't trust easy, but they trust their eyes." Jack nodded slow. It made sense. Lily wasn't reckless. Eli had told him that much. The way his sister double-checked locks on the back door. The way she never took candy from strangers even at Halloween unless Eli was standing right there with her. She wasn't a girl who got fooled easy, which meant whoever was driving that van had earned her trust somehow. Bit by bit. Enough that she felt safe enough to climb inside. "She thought he was a good guy," Jack said, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "She thought she was helping." Sarah looked down at the note again, then back up at Jack, her expression hard now, the softness from earlier gone. "Until she found out what he was really doing." "Until she found the cages," Bear said quietly. The barn seemed to grow colder, even though nothing about the temperature had changed. Jack imagined Lily standing right where he stood now, seeing the same rows of empty crates, the same stacks of fake paperwork, realizing all at once that the kind man with the injured puppy was really a thief, realizing she'd walked herself straight into something terrible, believing the whole time she was doing right. "She tried to leave," Ray said, pointing toward a section of fence near the back of the barn where the wire had been bent and pulled apart, low to the ground. Small enough for a child to squeeze through. "Looks like she made it out this way." Jack's chest tightened. Then where is she now? Nobody answered right away. The wind picked up outside, rattling the loose barn boards, whistling through the gaps in the walls. Sarah walked the fence line herself, crouching down to study the bent wire the same way Ray had. If she got out here, she could be anywhere. Woods on one side, open field on the other. She's 10 years old and she's been out here for over a day. Jack's mind raced back through everything he now knew. The note, the empty cages, the fake papers with the scratched-out names. This wasn't some small, sloppy operation. Somebody had built this carefully, patient enough to gain a child's trust, organized enough to fake legal paperwork, careful enough to pick an abandoned farm nobody would think twice about. This wasn't just about finding Lily anymore, though that mattered more than anything else in the world right now. This was about finding whoever was running the whole operation. Because whoever they were, they knew this farm. They knew these cages. And if Lily had seen their face, if she knew what they looked like, then she wasn't just a missing girl who wandered into the wrong place. She was a witness. And that made her more than lost. It made her a target. The morning came gray and wet, the kind of sky that couldn't decide if it wanted to rain or just sit heavy over the town. Jack hadn't slept much. He'd spent half the night at his kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold in front of him, staring at a printout Sarah had emailed over. County property records. The abandoned farm belonged to a man named Daniel Hayes. Jack ran the name through his mind, trying to place it, and then it clicked into position like a key turning in a lock. Daniel Hayes. Everybody in town knew that name. 6 years back, there'd been a fire at the old textile warehouse on Route 9. 3 workers trapped on the second floor, smoke so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Daniel had gone in twice, carried 2 men out on his own back, then gone in a third time for the last one when the roof was already starting to groan and crack above him. The newspaper had run his photo on the front page for a week straight. Local hero. The kind of man mothers pointed to when they wanted their sons to grow up decent. Jack sat with that for a long moment, feeling something twist in his gut. It didn't fit. None of it fit. He called Sarah first thing, then Bear and Doc and Ray, and they met at the garage before the sun had fully cleared the tree line. The coffee pot was already going, and nobody touched it. They just stood around the workbench, looking at the papers Sarah had spread out. "Firefighter," Doc said, shaking his head slow. "Retired 4 years ago. Wife died not long after that. Cancer, I think." "Man loses his whole life in the span of a year," Bear said quietly. "House still full of her things, probably. No kids from what I can tell." Jack looked at the photograph Sarah had pulled from an old newspaper archive. Daniel Hayes, younger, soot on his face, exhausted, being helped into an ambulance while paramedics checked him over. His eyes in that photo weren't the eyes of a man who wanted glory. They were the eyes of somebody who'd just done what needed doing and didn't much care if anybody noticed. "Doesn't mean he's not involved," Sarah said. "Grief does strange things to people. Loneliness does stranger things." They drove out to Daniel's actual house first, a small place on the edge of town with a sagging porch and a yard that hadn't been mowed in weeks. No answer at the door. Jack peered through a window and saw dishes stacked in the sink, mail piled on a table, the kind of mess that spoke of a man who'd stopped caring about appearances a long time ago. They went back to the farm. This time Ray found what mattered. Behind the barn, half buried under a stack of old lumber, was a metal toolbox. Inside it, Jack found a stack of receipts, fuel purchases, van maintenance, a folder with photographs of dogs, cats, all tagged with names and locations, The kind of information you'd need to track stolen pets and match them to buyers looking for specific breeds. But there was something else, too. A folded letter, handwritten. The ink smudged like it had gotten wet at some point and dried again. Jack read it out loud, his voice low. "You don't have a choice anymore, Daniel. You're already part of this. If you go to the police now, they won't believe you were just trying to help animals. They'll see the money. They'll see your name on the van registration. Keep quiet and keep doing your part, and none of this touches you." It wasn't signed, but Jack recognized the tone right away. Somebody had been pulling Daniel's strings for a long time, using fear and guilt to keep him trapped in something he probably never wanted any part of. "He's not the one running this," Jack said, folding the letter carefully. "Somebody else is?" "Doesn't change the fact that he's involved," Sarah said. But her voice had softened some. The hard edge from before dulled just slightly. Jack was already moving toward the truck. "We need to talk to him. Now." They drove back to Daniel's house one more time, faster this time, Jack's knuckles white on the wheel. But when they pulled up, the front door stood wide open, swinging slow in the wind. The mail on the table had been swept onto the floor. A chair was knocked over. Daniel Hayes was gone. Jack stood in the doorway of Daniel Hayes's house for a long moment, staring at the overturned chair. Something cold settled in his stomach. "Somebody was here," Ray said, crouching by the table, "and it wasn't a friendly visit." "Or he ran," Doc offered. "Scared people knock things over too, trying to get out fast." Sarah was already on her phone, calling in the address, her voice clipped and professional. Jack barely heard her. He was looking at a photograph on the wall, half crooked now, like someone had brushed past it in a hurry. A woman with kind eyes and a soft smile stood next to a younger Daniel, both of them squinting into the sun at some barbecue or picnic. Jack figured that was the wife. "We need to find him before whoever did this does," Jack said. Bear rubbed a hand over his beard. "Where do we even start? Man could be anywhere." Jack thought about it. A man like Daniel, a firefighter for 20 years, didn't just disappear into nothing. Men like that had brothers. The kind of brotherhood Jack understood better than most. "Fire station," Jack said. "His old crew. They'll know him better than anybody." They drove to the station on Miller Street, a squat brick building with 2 trucks parked out front, engines idling low. Jack walked in with Bear at his side, and a few firefighters looked up from where they were cleaning gear, eyes flicking over the leather vests with the kind of caution Jack had gotten used to a long time ago. An older man with gray at his temples and a captain's badge stepped forward. "Help you fellas?" "Looking for information on Daniel Hayes," Jack said. "It's important. His life might depend on it." The captain's face changed at the name. Something soft crossed his features, worry mixed with old affection. "Danny, come on back." He led them to a small office in the back, closed the door, and sat down heavy in his chair like the weight of the conversation had already tired him out. "Danny was the best of us," the captain said. "Ran into that warehouse fire without blinking. Saved 3 men. But after Carol died..." He shook his head. "It was like watching a light go out. She was sick almost 2 years before it took her. He nursed her through all of it, cooked for her, bathed her near the end, sat by her bed every night. When she passed, he just kind of folded in on himself." "Did he stay in touch with anybody?" Jack asked. "Friends, family?" "Tried to," the captain said. "We'd call, invite him to things. He'd say yes, and then not show. After a while, people stopped asking. That's on us too, I suppose. Should have pushed harder." Doc leaned forward. "Anybody new come around? Anybody he mentioned?" The captain thought about it. "There was a fellow maybe a year back. Ran some animal rescue outfit. Danny got real into it, said it gave him something to do with his hands again. Something that mattered. I remember thinking it was good for him, finally getting out of that empty house. You remember a name? Jack asked, though he already had a guess forming in his gut. Travis something. Never met him myself. Danny talked about him like he'd hung the moon, though. Said the man understood what it meant to save something helpless. Jack felt the pieces sliding together, ugly and clear. A lonely man, desperate to feel useful again, and somebody smart enough to see that loneliness as an opportunity. Thank you, Jack said, standing. If he contacts you, anybody, please call us. The captain nodded, worry still creasing his brow. Is Danny in trouble? I think he might be, Jack said honestly, but I don't think he's the one who caused it. They drove back out to the farm, the gray sky pressing lower now, threatening rain again. Ray walked the perimeter of the barn slowly, his eyes scanning every board, every shadow. Jack stood near the entrance, running his hand along the old wood, feeling the roughness of it under his palm. That was when Bear called out from the far side. Jack, over here. Jack walked around the barn, boots crunching over gravel and dead grass, and stopped cold when he saw it. Scratched into the wood with something sharp, maybe a nail or a piece of metal, were words written in shaky, desperate handwriting. Please believe me. I tried to stop him. Jack read the words twice, then a third time, like they might change if he stared hard enough. Please believe me. I tried to stop him. That ain't the handwriting of a man who kidnapped a little girl, Bear said quietly. No, Jack agreed. That's the handwriting of a man who got in over his head and didn't know how to get out. Ray crouched down near the base of the wall, brushing away some loose straw. Boot prints here, fresh. Somebody left in a hurry, and not through the front. Doc snapped a picture of the message with his phone. Sarah's gonna want this. She'll get it, Jack said. But first I need to check on Eli. The drive back to the garage felt longer than it was. Jack's mind kept circling the same thought, over and over, like a dog chasing its tail. Somebody had scared Daniel bad enough to make him run. And that same somebody had Lily. When Jack pulled into the garage lot, he saw Eli sitting on the front step, knees pulled up to his chest, the same soaked bracelet still wrapped tight around his small fist. The boy stood the second he saw Jack's bike, and something about the way his whole body went rigid with hope made Jack's chest hurt. Did you find her? Eli asked, before Jack even had his helmet off. Not yet, Jack said, keeping his voice steady and calm, the way he'd learned to do a long time ago when calm was the only thing that could keep a bad situation from getting worse. But we found something important. We're getting closer, buddy. I promise you that. Eli's chin trembled. It's been so long. Jack knelt down in front of him, the gravel biting into his knees through his jeans. I know it feels that way, but listen to me. Nobody is giving up. Not me, not Bear, not Doc, not Ray. We are not going to stop looking until we bring your sister home. You hear me? You promise? I promise, Jack said, and he meant it with everything he had. Eli nodded slowly, some of the tension easing out of his small shoulders. He looked down at the bracelet in his hand, thumb rubbing over the letters spelling out Lily's name. She made this for me, Eli said. Said if I ever got scared, I should hold it and think about her being right there with me. That's real smart, Jack said. Your sister sounds like a pretty amazing kid. She is, Eli whispered. Jack stood back up, resting a hand briefly on Eli's head. You stay here with Mrs. Dawson. Bear's wife is going to keep you fed and safe while we work. Can you do that for me?" Eli nodded again, and Jack watched him walk back towards the office where Bear's wife was already opening the door, her face soft with worry and kindness. Back at the workbench, Doc had his laptop open, fingers moving fast over the keys. "Got something," he said. "Pulled up local animal rescue organizations registered in the county. There's only one run by somebody named Travis." "Let's see him," Jack said, leaning over Doc's shoulder. The photo that came up showed a man in his late 30s, clean cut, wearing a friendly smile like it was stitched onto his face. Travis Cole, founder of Second Chance Paws, an animal rescue group that claimed to have saved hundreds of dogs and cats over the past 3 years. "Looks like a nice enough guy," Bear muttered. "They always do," Jack said, his jaw tight. "That's the whole trick." Ray pulled up another window on the screen, scrolling through old social media posts. Photos of Travis holding puppies, kittens, smiling next to families reunited with lost pets. Comments underneath praised him, called him a hero, an angel for animals. "Look at this one," Ray said, pointing. A post from 8 months back showed Travis standing next to Daniel Hayes in front of a red van, both men grinning, a stack of pet carriers behind them. The caption read, "So grateful for volunteers like Daniel who give their time and heart to save these babies." "There it is," Jack said quietly. "That's our connection." Doc kept scrolling. "Says here his rescue operates mostly in rural areas, farms, back roads. Says it helps them access animals other rescues can't reach." "Convenient," Bear said. Jack stared at the photo a long moment, at Daniel's face, so proud and hopeful in that picture. No idea what he was really being pulled into. "He used him," Jack said. "Used a grieving man's guilt and loneliness to build himself a cover." "So what do we do now?" Bear asked. Jack straightened, feeling something harden inside him, something steady and sure. "Now we find out where Travis Cole really operates, and we find Lily before he decides she's a loose end." The old fire station on Route 9 had been converted into a records office years ago, but the chief still kept a desk there 3 days a week, mostly out of habit. Jack knew him a little. Everybody in this county knew everybody, one way or another. "Daniel Hayes," the chief said, leaning back in his chair when Jack asked. "Good man. Best kind of firefighter there is. Ran into a burning warehouse back in '09 to pull out 2 workers who got trapped when the roof started coming down. Saved both their lives. Never asked for a medal, never wanted one." "What happened to him?" Jack asked. "Why'd he stop?" The chief's face changed, the pride sliding into something heavier. "His wife, Carol. Cancer took her about 4 years back. Daniel was never the same after that. Quit the department a few months later. Said he couldn't focus right. Said his mind kept wandering when it needed to be sharp. Can't fault a man for that." "Anybody keep in touch with him?" "Some of the guys tried. He stopped answering calls after a while. Went quiet. Real quiet." The chief shook his head slowly. "Grief does that sometimes. Turns a man into a ghost of himself." Jack thanked him and rode straight to Doc's place, where Bear and Ray were already waiting in the garage, the laptop open on an old workbench between 2 motorcycle engines in pieces. "Grief," Jack said, swinging off his bike. "That's the door Travis walked through." Doc nodded, already typing. "Makes sense. A man like Daniel, used to saving people, used to feeling needed. Then all of a sudden he's got nothing to do, and nobody who needs him." "Travis found him at the right moment," Jack said. "Probably showed up all friendly, talking about rescuing animals nobody else could reach. Made Daniel feel like his old self again, like his life still mattered." Ray pulled up more old posts on Second Chance Paws' page, scrolling slow. Here, comment from Daniel himself posted about 2 years back. Says, "This work has given me a reason to get up in the morning again. Thank you, Travis, for showing me I still have something to give." The words sat heavy in the room. "He wasn't looking to do wrong," Bear said quietly. "He was looking for a reason to keep breathing." "And Travis saw that," Jack said, his voice low and hard. "Saw a hurting man and used him. Probably never even had to lie much at first. Just let Daniel believe what he wanted to believe." Doc kept digging, cross-referencing property records, old business filings, anything with Travis Cole's name attached. After 20 minutes of silence, broken only by the clicking of keys, he sat up straighter. "Got something," Doc said. "Filed 3 years ago. Travis leased a piece of land out past Miller's Creek, way back off Route 22. Old dairy farm, foreclosed on before he picked it up cheap. Never renewed the lease last year, but there's no record of him giving it up either." "That's not the barn we already checked," Ray said, leaning in to look. "No," Doc said. "Different property, about 6 miles from Daniel's place." Jack felt something tighten in his chest, the same feeling he used to get right before a fight, except now it wasn't anger driving it. It was purpose. "Pull up a satellite view," he said. Doc did, and the image loaded slow, then clear. A farmhouse, half collapsed, sitting behind a barn with a metal roof still holding together. A long dirt driveway leading back from the main road, hidden mostly by trees. Parked near the barn, barely visible under a tarp, was the unmistakable shape of a van. "Red van," Ray said, pointing at a sliver of color peeking out from beneath the covering. Jack stared at the screen, jaw tight, heart pounding steady and hard. "That's where he's keeping them," Jack said. "That's where Lily is." Bear was already grabbing his jacket off the hook by the door. "Then let's go get her." The ride out to Miller's Creek took 20 minutes that felt like 20 hours. Jack led the way, gravel spitting up behind his back tire, his brothers close behind him in a tight line. Nobody spoke over the roar of the engines. There was nothing left to say. They all knew what they were riding toward. They cut their engines a quarter mile out and walked the rest of the way, boots quiet on the dirt road. The old farmhouse looked worse up close, its windows broken, its porch sagging like a tired old man's shoulders. But the barn behind it stood solid, patched here and there with new tin, like somebody had cared enough to keep it standing. Jack held up a hand. Bear, Doc, and Ray stopped behind him. "Listen," Jack whispered. From inside the barn came sounds, soft ones, a puppy whining, the scrape of something being dragged, and under it all a voice, small, steady, singing. Jack's chest tightened. He knew that voice. He had heard Eli describe it 100 times in the last 2 days. He pushed the barn door open slow, careful not to let the hinges creak too loud. Inside, the air smelled like hay and animal fur and old wood. Cages lined one wall, stacked 2 and 3 high, filled with dogs and cats of every size. Some slept, some paced. All of them looked thin and scared. And in the middle of it all, sitting cross-legged on the dirt floor with a small brown puppy curled in her lap, was Lily. Her clothes were dirty. Her hair was tangled. There was a scrape on her cheek that made Jack's jaw clench tight. But her eyes, when she looked up and saw 4 grown men standing in the doorway, did not look empty. They looked tired, scared, but not broken. "Are you here to hurt me?" she asked, her voice shaking but steady enough to be heard clearly. "No, sweetheart," Jack said, kneeling down slow so he wouldn't scare her further. "Your brother sent us. Eli. He never stopped believing somebody would find you." Lily's lip trembled at the sound of her brother's name. "Eli," she whispered. "Is he okay? Is he safe?" He's safe, Jack said. He's been waiting for you. He's been so brave. Tears filled Lily's eyes, but she didn't let them fall yet. She looked down at the puppy in her lap, then around at the cages full of frightened animals. I couldn't leave them, she said. They were so scared. Somebody had to stay with them and tell them it was going to be okay. Bear made a sound low in his throat, something between a laugh and a sob. Doc wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand. Ray just stood there, quiet as always, but his jaw was tight and his eyes were shining. You did good, Jack said softly. You did real good, Lily. Now let's get you and these animals somewhere safe. He reached out his hand, and Lily took it without hesitation, the puppy still cradled against her chest. They loaded the animals into the truck bed Doc had borrowed for exactly this reason. Cages stacked carefully, gentle hands making sure none of them got hurt in the process. Lily refused to let go of the little brown puppy the whole ride back, and nobody asked her to. When they pulled into Doc's garage, Eli was already there, pacing back and forth in front of the open bay door, Sarah Bennett standing beside him with a hand on his shoulder to keep him calm. The moment the truck door opened and Lily climbed out, puppy still in her arms, Eli let out a sound that wasn't quite a word. It was just pure joy, pure relief, breaking loose all at once. He ran across the garage floor and threw his arms around his sister so hard they both nearly fell over. Lily wrapped one arm around him, careful not to crush the puppy between them, and the two of them stood there crying into each other's shoulders, while the whole garage went quiet around them. Sarah Bennett watched with her hand pressed over her mouth. Bear had to turn away and pretend to check on the puppy so nobody would see his face. Doc didn't even try to hide it. Jack stood back, letting the moment belong to the two kids. But when Eli finally looked up, his eyes found Jack across the garage, and the boy mouthed two words that Jack would carry with him for the rest of his life. Thank you. The morning after Lily's rescue, the sun came up soft and gold over Doc's garage, like even the sky knew something good had happened. By 8 o'clock, cars started pulling into the gravel lot. By 9, the lot was full. Jack stood by the open bay door, wiping grease off his hands with a rag when he saw the first family walk up. It was the Hendersons, whose old beagle named Max had gone missing 3 weeks back. Mrs. Henderson had Max on a leash, the dog trotting happy and healthy beside her, tail wagging so hard his whole back end shook. Mr. Mercer, she said, her voice cracking. I don't know how to thank you. Jack shook his head. Wasn't just me, ma'am. Took all of us. But she wasn't listening. She was already crying, hugging him before he could stop her, and Jack stood there stiff as a fence post, not sure what to do with his arms. More families came. A man whose cat had been gone for a month. 2 kids who ran up asking if they could see the motorcycles, their mother trailing behind with a casserole dish balanced on one hip, saying she didn't know what else to bring, but she had to bring something. An old woman named Mrs. Pruitt hugged Bear so tight he turned red in the face, thanking him over and over for finding her little terrier, Biscuit. By 10 o'clock, the garage lot looked more like a town fair than a repair shop. Someone had brought a folding table and covered it with food. Kids ran between the motorcycles, laughing, asking Ray if he'd let them sit on the seats. Doc handed out lemonade like he was running a stand at a ball game. Jack stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching it all like he wasn't quite sure it was real. You look like a man who wants to disappear, Sarah Bennett said, walking up beside him with a paper cup of coffee in her hand. Don't know what to do with all this, Jack admitted. Feels like too much. You saved a little girl and a barn full of animals, Sarah said. Seems like exactly the right amount, if you ask me. Jack shook his head, slow. I didn't do anything special. Boy asked for help. I helped. That's all it was. Sarah studied him for a second, her eyes sharp the way they always were when she was working something out. You know, most people would have called the cops and gone back to their coffee. You didn't do that. Anybody would have done the same. No, Sarah said. They wouldn't have. That's the difference. Jack didn't answer. He looked out at the crowd, at Eli sitting on Bear's shoulders laughing, at Lily sitting cross-legged on a blanket with 3 different puppies climbing over her lap. His chest felt tight, but not in the bad way it used to. It felt tight like something was healing. He thought about all the years people crossed the street when they saw him coming. All the times a mother pulled her kid closer when Jack walked into a store. He'd told himself he didn't care. But standing here now, watching these same kinds of people bring him casseroles and hug his neck, something in him didn't know how to hold it. I just did what was right, he said quietly, almost to himself. That's usually where heroes come from, Sarah said. Before Jack could argue that word, a car pulled into the lot fast, gravel crunching under the tires. It was Sarah's partner, Deputy Collins, stepping out of his cruiser with his hat still in his hand and his face tight with something that made the noise of the party start to fade around them. Sarah set her coffee down on the folding table. What is it? Deputy Collins glanced at Jack, then back at Sarah. We processed the farm, found records, bank statements, receipts, names of buyers. It's Travis Cole's whole operation going back years. That's good, Sarah said. That's what we needed. It would be, Collins said. Except Travis is gone. Cleared out his rental this morning. Neighbors say they saw him loading boxes into his truck before sunrise. The laughter in the yard kept going behind them. Kids still playing, families still hugging each other in the morning sun. But Jack felt the warmth drain out of his chest like someone had pulled a plug. He's running, Jack said. Looks that way, Collins said. And if he's smart, he's not going far, not yet. Man like that doesn't leave without covering his tracks first. Sarah's jaw tightened. Which means he's not done. Jack found Daniel Hayes sitting on the back steps of his farmhouse, staring at nothing. The place looked different in the daylight. Less like a crime scene now, more like just a sad old house with a barn nobody used anymore. Someone had taken down the police tape from the porch rail, but the marks it left behind were still there, sticky lines on the wood. Daniel, Jack said, walking up slow. You doing all right? Daniel didn't look up right away. His hands were shaking a little, folded together between his knees. I keep thinking about that girl, he said. How scared she must have been in that barn. And I knew. Some part of me knew what Travis was doing, and I didn't stop it. You told the truth when it mattered, Jack said. That counts for something. Does it? Daniel's voice cracked. My wife used to say I ran into burning buildings because I couldn't stand the thought of somebody being alone in the dark. And then I go and help a man steal people's pets, leave families crying over empty leashes. He shook his head. I don't know who I am anymore. Jack sat down beside him on the step. The wood creaked under his weight. I spent 20 years letting people believe I was somebody I wasn't proud of, he said, because it was easier than trying to be better. You're not that. You made a mistake. Different thing. Before Daniel could answer, a truck rolled up the gravel drive, dust kicking up behind it. Travis Cole stepped out, wearing sunglasses even though the sky was gray, his jaw set tight. Well, isn't this cozy? Travis said, walking toward them with his hands in his jacket pockets. The war hero and the biker having a heart-to-heart. Jack stood up slow, keeping himself between Travis and Daniel without making it look like that's what he was doing. You shouldn't be here. Free country, Travis said. He looked past Jack, right at Daniel. You've been talking to people, Daniel. I heard. Talking to the deputy, talking to reporters, maybe. I haven't talked to anybody yet, Daniel said, his voice quiet but steady. But I'm going to. Travis's smile didn't move, but something behind his eyes went cold. Think real hard before you do that, because the second you open your mouth, I'll make sure everybody in this county knows exactly what kind of man you really are. The insurance claim after the fire station shut down, the money that went missing. You think anybody's going to care about the truth once I'm done? They'll remember you as the thief who used his dead wife for sympathy. Daniel's face went white. That's not what happened, and you know it. Doesn't matter what happened, Travis said. Matters what people believe, and I'm real good at making people believe things. Jack stepped forward, his voice low and even. You're threatening him. I'm reminding him, Travis said, that everybody's got something to lose, even you. He turned toward Jack, tilting his head like he was studying a piece of meat. Speaking of which, I did some digging on you too, Mercer. Assault charge, 1998. Bar fight that put a man in the hospital. You didn't mention that part when you were playing hero for the cameras, did you? Jack's jaw tightened. That was a long time ago. Doesn't matter, Travis said, echoing his own words back with a smile that had no warmth in it at all. Matters what people believe, and once I start talking, folks are going to remember exactly what a Hell's Angel looks like, not the man who found some puppies, the man who put another man in a hospital bed for looking at him wrong. That's not who I am anymore, Jack said, his voice steady despite the heat rising in his chest. Maybe not, Travis said, backing toward his truck. But it's who you were, and people don't forget that kind of thing. Not really. He climbed into the cab and rolled down the window. You want to save your little town, Mercer? Better hope they still trust you when I'm finished talking. The truck pulled away, gravel spraying behind the tires, leaving Jack and Daniel standing in the quiet, the morning suddenly feeling a lot colder than it had a few minutes before. The story spread through Riverbend faster than Jack could have imagined. By the time he got back to the garage that afternoon, Bear was already waiting for him with a face that said, trouble. You seen the paper? Bear asked, holding up a printed page from the local news website. The headline sat above a photo of Jack from years back, taken at a rally he barely remembered attending. Hell's Angel with violent past leads. Search for missing girl, it said. Jack took the page and read it slow. Somebody had dug up the old assault charge. They had details Jack hadn't spoken about in over a decade. The hospital, the stitches, the night he wasn't proud of. They twisted it, Jack said quietly. Made it sound like I go looking for fights. Folks don't always read past the headline, Bear said. Jack knew that better than anyone. Over the next 2 days, Jack felt the shift everywhere he went. Small things, at first. The woman at the diner who used to wave now looked down at her coffee cup when Jack walked past. The mechanic 3 shops down who used to nod hello crossed the street instead. Then it got louder. At the grocery store, Jack overheard 2 men talking near the checkout line, not bothering to lower their voices. I heard he put a guy in the hospital, one of them said. Broke his jaw in 2 places. And we let him run around playing hero, the other said, chasing after kids like he's some kind of saint. Jack set his basket down and walked out without buying anything. The worst part wasn't the strangers. It was the people who had shaken his hand just days before, the same folks who had thanked him for bringing Lily home safe. Now they looked at him different, like they were seeing the tattoos for the first time, like the leather vest suddenly meant something dangerous again instead of just being what he wore. Even Eli's teacher, a woman named Mrs. Palmer who had hugged Jack outside the school just last week, gave him a tight, uncertain smile when he came to pick up Eli one afternoon at Sarah's request. I heard some things, she said carefully. About your past. It was a long time ago, Jack told her. Same words he'd told Travis. I'm sure it was, she said, but her eyes didn't agree. Sarah Bennett called Jack into her office 2 days later. She looked tired, the kind of tired that came from too many phone calls and not enough sleep. I have to be straight with you, she said, sitting behind her desk. The department's getting pressure. Travis has been talking to reporters. He's telling everyone that a convicted felon shouldn't be leading a civilian search party, and some people on the town council are starting to agree with him. I never hid what I did, Jack said. I did my time. I've spent 20 years trying to be a different man. I believe you, Sarah said. I do. But belief isn't evidence, Jack. And right now, I need to make sure everything about this investigation holds up. If a case ever goes to trial, and the defense finds out a Hell's Angel with an assault record was leading witness interviews and gathering evidence, it could poison everything we've worked for. It could get Travis off on a technicality. Jack felt his stomach drop. So what are you saying? Sarah met his eyes, and for a moment Jack could see she didn't like what she was about to say. I need you to step back, just for now, until we can review the evidence properly and make sure nothing gets thrown out because of who's involved. Step back, Jack repeated, the words feeling heavy in his mouth. After everything. I know it isn't fair, Sarah said, but I can't risk the case, not when we're this close. Jack stood up slow, his hands pressed flat against his knees like he needed something solid to hold on to. He walked out of the office without another word, out into the gray afternoon light, feeling the same old weight settle back onto his shoulders. The weight he thought he'd finally put down. 20 years of trying, and one headline had undone it in 2 days. The garage was quiet, except for the hum of the old radio Bear had turned down low. Jack sat on an upside-down bucket near the workbench, staring at a wrench he wasn't using. His hands were still. That never happened. Bear leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Doc sat on the edge of a tool chest, and Ray stood near the garage door, watching the rain start to fall outside. Quiet as always. You gonna say something? Bear said. Or just stare at that wrench till it rusts? Jack didn't look up. Not much to say. That's a lie, Doc said. You've been chewing on something since you walked in here. Spit it out. Jack set the wrench down slow. He rubbed his hands over his face, feeling the roughness of his own palms, the calluses built from years of honest work. Work that was supposed to mean something. Work that was supposed to prove something. Sarah pulled me off the case, he said finally. Says my record could sink the whole thing if it goes to trial. Says the department can't risk it. Bear's jaw tightened. That's garbage. Maybe, Jack said. Maybe not. She's not wrong that a defense lawyer would have a field day with it. Convicted felon, Hell's Angel, leading the investigation. Doesn't matter what I did after. Just matters what's on paper. What's on paper isn't who you are, Doc said. You've spent 20 years proving that. Have I? Jack looked up finally, and his eyes were tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Because it took 2 days. 2 days for this whole town to go right back to looking at me like I'm something to be scared of. The lady at the diner, Eli's teacher, hell, half the grocery store. People are stupid sometimes, Ray said quietly from the doorway. It wasn't much, but coming from Ray, it counted for a paragraph. Maybe, Jack said, but maybe they're not wrong either. Maybe that's just who I am underneath it all. Man who broke another man's jaw. Man who scares kids until they get close enough to see that tattoos ain't the point. Bear pushed off the doorframe and walked over, crouching down so he was eye level with Jack. You listen to me. I've known you 22 years. I watched you crawl out of whatever hole you were in after that fight. I watched you build this place with your own hands. I watched you help the Hendersons keep their house when the bank was fixing to take it. I watched you teach half the kids in this town how to ride a bike, both kinds. That's not nothing, Jack. That's everything. Doesn't matter what you watched, Jack said. Matters what they see, and what they see is a headline. Then we make them see different, Doc said. We're not done yet. Sarah didn't say you're finished. She said step back for now. For now, Jack repeated, like the words tasted bad. How long is now, Doc? Till Travis is long gone with somebody else's dog? Till Daniel takes the whole fall by himself because I wasn't there to back him up? Nobody had an answer for that. Jack stood up and walked to the open garage door, looking out at the rain coming down harder now, streaking the windows of the shop across the street. Somewhere out there, Travis was probably packing a bag, feeling smart, feeling safe. I keep thinking, Jack said, not turning around, that if I just do enough good, somebody's going to stop seeing the vest and start seeing me. But maybe that's not how it works. Maybe you don't get to outrun what you did. Maybe you just carry it. That's not fair to you, Bear said. Fair's got nothing to do with it, Jack said. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out and saw Daniel's name on the screen. He answered, and Daniel's voice came through ragged and broken. Jack, I can't do this, Daniel said. Travis is gone. Really gone. He slipped past the checkpoint on Route 9 last night and nobody caught him. And now everybody's looking at me like I'm the one who let him go. Like I planned this whole thing from the start. Daniel, I should have stopped him weeks ago, Daniel said, his voice cracking. I should have said something the first time I saw the cages. I didn't. And now Lily almost paid for it, and Travis is free, and it's my fault. All of it. Jack closed his eyes, feeling the weight of it settle over him like the rain outside. Two men, both trying to be good, both drowning under the same water. The rain had stopped some time before dawn, leaving the road outside Jack's garage shiny and dark. Jack hadn't slept much. He'd spent most of the night sitting in the old chair by his window, listening to the drip of water off the gutters, thinking about Daniel's voice on the phone, thinking about Sarah's careful words, thinking about the wrench he still hadn't put back on its hook. He was wiping down the workbench when he heard the small footsteps outside. Light ones, quick ones, the kind that belonged to someone who hadn't quite learned to walk without running yet. The garage door was already halfway open, and Eli ducked under it, his backpack still on, like he'd come straight from home without stopping. His shoes were untied, his hair stuck up on one side like he'd slept on it wrong. In his hand, held tight like it might fly away, was Lily's bracelet. Eli? Jack set down his rag. Does your mom know you're here? She's making breakfast, Eli said. Like that answered everything. He walked further into the garage, looking around at the tools and the motorcycle parts and the calendar on the wall that was still turned to last month. Then he looked at Jack, and his face was serious in the way only a kid's face can be serious, without any of the tiredness adults carry around. I heard Mom talking on the phone, Eli said. She said you got taken off the case. She said people are saying bad things about you again. Jack didn't answer right away. He crouched down instead, the way he had that first day in the diner, so he was eye level with the boy. Some people are, Jack said. That's true. Eli held out the bracelet. Jack looked down at it, the small stitched letters spelling out Lily's name, the thread a little frayed now from everything it had been through. Lily gave me this the day she went missing, Eli said. She said if anything ever happened to her, I should give it to whoever helped find her, because that's who a hero really is. Not the person everybody says is a hero, the person who actually shows up. Jack's throat felt tight. He didn't reach for the bracelet yet. You showed up, Eli said, when nobody else did. The police said maybe she wandered off. Everybody in that diner just watched me cry and didn't do nothing. But you knelt down. You asked me to tell you everything. Nobody else asked me that." "Eli. You found her," Eli said, and his voice cracked a little, the way it does when a kid is trying hard not to cry but isn't quite winning. "In that barn, with all those puppies, you didn't stop until you found her. That's not something a bad guy does." Jack looked down at his own hands, rough and scarred, the same hands that had once broken a man's jaw in an alley over something that didn't even matter anymore. The same hands that had pulled Lily out of that cold barn and wrapped her in his jacket. "People are going to say what they want," Eli went on. "Grown-ups do that, but I know what I saw. I saw you come when nobody else would. That means you're not the bad guy. That means you're just Jack." Jack reached out and took the bracelet from Eli's small hand. Careful, like it was something breakable. He turned it over once in his fingers, reading Lily's name stitched there in blue thread. "Just Jack," he repeated quietly. "Yeah," Eli said, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. "That's enough. That's plenty." Jack looked at the boy for a long moment, this 7-year-old kid who had run through the rain into a diner full of strangers, because he believed, somewhere deep down, that somebody good would help him. That same belief was standing in his garage right now, holding out hope like it weighed nothing at all. Something in Jack's chest loosened, like a fist finally unclenching after being closed too long. He stood up slowly, tucking the bracelet into his shirt pocket, right over his heart. "Travis is still out there," Jack said, more to himself than to Eli. "And Daniel's drowning in guilt he doesn't deserve. And Lily's animals still need homes." He looked toward the door, toward the road, toward whatever was waiting out there in the daylight. "Time I stopped worrying about what people see when they look at me and started worrying about what's right." Jack found Daniel exactly where Ray said he'd be, sitting on the tailgate of an old pickup truck parked behind the fire station where Daniel used to work. He wasn't doing anything, just sitting there, staring at his own hands, the way a man stares at something he doesn't recognize anymore. Jack parked his motorcycle across the lot and walked over slow, giving Daniel time to see him coming. He didn't want to spook him. Daniel looked up when Jack's boots crunched on the gravel, and something in his face flinched, like he expected to be yelled at. "You got a minute?" Jack asked. Daniel shrugged. "Nobody else wants to talk to me. Might as well." Jack sat down on the tailgate beside him, leaving a little space between them. For a while, neither of them said anything. A pigeon landed on the fire station roof, then flew off again. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice and went quiet. "You know I found Lily in your barn," Jack said finally. Daniel's jaw tightened. "I know." "You know she was scared. And cold. And she'd been taking care of those animals for days, even though nobody was taking care of her." "I know, Jack." Daniel's voice cracked. "You don't have to remind me. I think about it every single hour I'm awake." "Then why'd you run?" Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his words came out slow, like he was pulling them up from somewhere deep and heavy. "Because I'm ashamed," he said. "Because I let it happen. Because Travis came to me 2 years ago talking about saving abandoned animals, giving them a second chance, and I thought maybe I could do something good again, something that mattered. After Carol died, I didn't feel like I mattered to anybody anymore." Jack didn't say anything. He just listened, the way nobody had really listened to him back when he needed it most. "I didn't know," Daniel said. "Not at first. He'd bring animals to the farm, tell me they were strays, tell me we were finding them homes. By the time I figured out what he was really doing, I was already part of it. My name was on paperwork, my property, My van, Jack. He told me if I said anything, he'd make sure everyone knew I helped steal people's pets. He said nobody would believe a grieving old man who used to be a firefighter suddenly turned criminal. He said I'd lose everything I had left. So you stayed quiet. I stayed quiet, Daniel said, and his voice broke on the last word. And a little girl almost got hurt because of it. I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't found her in time. I keep thinking that's on me. Jack turned so he was facing Daniel directly. You made a mistake, a bad one. But you didn't hurt Lily. You didn't touch those animals. From what I hear, you're the one who kept them fed and safe while Travis was off doing whatever he was doing. That doesn't make it right. No, Jack agreed. It doesn't. But hiding here feeling sorry for yourself doesn't make it right either. It just lets Travis keep running free while you sit here drowning in guilt he handed you like it was yours to carry. Daniel looked at him, eyes red-rimmed. What am I supposed to do? Stop hiding, Jack said simply. Tell the truth, all of it. Give people something to prove Travis planned this whole thing, that you were used same as everybody else. That's the only way any of this gets fixed. Daniel sat with that for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out a folded stack of papers, worn soft at the creases like they'd been handled many times. I kept these, he said, handing them over. Records, emails Travis sent me laying out routes, buyers, prices. I never showed anyone because I was scared of what it would mean for me. But it's all here. Everything he planned, everything he did. Jack took the papers carefully, feeling the weight of them in his hands. Jack called a meeting at Bear's repair shop 2 days later. He didn't call it a meeting, exactly. He just told Bear to put out some folding chairs, and he told Doc to make a big pot of coffee, and he asked Ray to spread the word quiet-like to any family in town who'd lost a pet in the last 2 years. He didn't say why. He just said, tell them it matters. Tell them somebody wants to listen. By 6 o'clock that evening, the shop was full. Not packed, but full enough that Bear had to pull chairs from his office and line them up against the wall by the tool cabinets. There was Mrs. Alvarez, who'd lost her old beagle Buster and cried for a week straight. There was a young couple, the Whitfields, whose daughter's cat had vanished from their porch. There was an older man named Frank, who didn't say much but kept twisting his cap in his hands. Jack stood at the front, still in his leather vest, still covered in the same tattoos that used to make people cross the street. But nobody in that room looked scared of him anymore. They looked tired. They looked hopeful. I know most of you don't know me well, Jack said. Some of you probably know me by reputation, and I understand if that reputation worried you some. But I'm not here to talk about me. I'm here because I think what happened to your pets wasn't random. I think it was planned, and I think the man who planned it is still walking around free. He told them about Travis, about the red van, about Daniel and the papers, and the routes and buyers written out in black and white. Nobody in the room said much at first. Then Mrs. Alvarez spoke up, her voice shaking. I saw a man with a van near my house the week before Buster disappeared. He said he was checking on strays. I thought he was being kind. He does that, Jack said gently. That's how he gets close enough. One by one, the stories came out. The Whitfields remembered a flyer left in their mailbox about a free pet safety check. Frank remembered a stranger asking questions about his old hunting dog at the feed store. Small things. Things nobody thought mattered on their own. But together, laid out on Bear's workbench next to Daniel's papers, they formed a shape, a pattern, a trail leading straight back to Travis Cole. Doc moved through the room quietly, refilling coffee cups, sitting beside Frank when his hands started shaking too hard to hold his mug steady. He didn't say much, but he didn't need to. Just having somebody calm nearby seemed to help. Ray sat in the corner with a notebook, writing down every date, every detail, matching them against the roots in Daniel's papers. His pen moved steady and sure, the same way he tracked footprints through the woods. Bear stood near the door the whole time, arms crossed, but his face was soft, not hard. When little kids from the families got restless, he crouched down and showed them how a socket wrench worked, kept them busy and smiling while their parents talked. By the end of the night, they had statements from 11 families. 11 stories that all led back to the same red van, the same friendly stranger asking questions that seemed harmless at the time. Jack looked around the room and felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't fear making people talk. Nobody in that room was scared into cooperating. They were talking because somebody had finally sat down and listened to them like their loss mattered. Sarah Bennett arrived near the end, standing quietly by the door with a folder under her arm. She'd heard about the gathering through Ray, and she'd come to see for herself. She watched Jack kneel beside Frank, listening patiently as the old man finally found the words to describe the stranger who'd asked too many questions about his dog. When Jack finally stood and handed her the collected statements alongside Daniel's records, Sarah looked at the stack in her hands, then at Jack, then at the room full of families who trusted him enough to speak. "This is enough," she said quietly. "This is more than enough." Sarah left that night with the folder tucked under her arm like it was something precious. Jack watched her taillights disappear down the road and felt the weight in his chest ease just a little. For the first time since Eli had run into that diner soaked and shaking, Jack felt like the truth was finally catching up to Travis Cole, instead of the other way around. It didn't take long after that. 2 days later, Ray came into the garage with his phone already out, scrolling through a message from a cousin who worked at the feed store on Route 9. "Guy matching Travis's description bought a full tank of gas and 2 cases of water," Ray said. "Paid cash. Asked about the back roads heading toward the county line." Doc looked up from the workbench where he'd been cleaning a wound on a stray cat's paw, one of the last animals still waiting to be claimed. "Sounds like a man getting ready to run." "He knows Sarah's got enough to arrest him now," Jack said. "He's not sticking around to find out how much." Bear crossed his thick arms and leaned against the wall. "So what do we do?" Jack thought about it for a long moment. Part of him, the old part, the part that used to solve problems with his fists, wanted to climb on his bike and go tear the barn door off wherever Travis was hiding. But that wasn't who he was anymore. He'd spent too many months building something better to throw it away in one angry afternoon. "We help find him," Jack said. "But we let Sarah and her people make the arrest. This isn't our fight to finish with our hands. It's theirs to finish with the law." Ray nodded slowly, like that was exactly what he expected Jack to say. Doc smiled a little, the kind of smile that said he was proud, though he didn't say it out loud. They called Sarah that same hour. She listened to what Ray had heard, then asked them to keep their ears open on the back roads, since nobody knew that stretch of country better than Ray and his brothers. Jack agreed, on one condition. "We spot him, we call you first," Jack said. "Not the other way around." Sarah paused on the other end of the line. "That's a first," she said. "A Hell's Angel asking permission." "People change," Jack said simply. By the next afternoon, word came through that a red van had been spotted near an old grain silo outside town, off a stretch of gravel road that hadn't seen much traffic since the highway bypass went in 20 years back. Ray knew the road. He'd hunted rabbits out there as a kid. Sarah's people set up at the edge of town, ready to move once they had a clear location. Jack, Bear, Doc, and Ray rode out separately, keeping their distance, just watching, just reporting back what they saw. That was the plan. Watch, Report. Let the law do its job. But plans have a way of changing when a man is desperate. Jack was the one who spotted the van first, pulled halfway into a ditch on an abandoned dirt road that curled behind the old silo like a forgotten memory. The back doors hung open. 2 empty cages sat tipped over in the weeds. But there were no animals in sight this time. Just Travis Cole, standing beside the van with his hands in his pockets, looking like a man who already knew he'd been caught. Jack cut his engine and sat there a moment, letting the quiet settle around them. The road was empty except for the 2 of them, tall grass swaying on either side, gray clouds rolling low across the sky like they were waiting to see what would happen next. He climbed off his bike, slow and easy, the way you'd approach a spooked animal, and walked toward Travis with his hands loose at his sides. Travis watched him come, and instead of running, instead of looking afraid, he smiled. It was a thin, cold smile, the kind that didn't reach his eyes. "There he is," Travis said, spreading his arms wide like he was greeting an old friend. "The big bad Hell's Angel riding in to save the day." Jack didn't answer. He just kept walking, slow and steady, his boots crunching against the gravel. "You know," Travis went on, "I did some digging on you, Jack Mercer. Bar fights, assault charges. A man doesn't just wash that off with a leather rag and a new paint job on his bike." He tilted his head, studying Jack like he was looking for a crack to slip his fingers into. "Tell me something. When you get close enough, when it's just you and me out here with nobody watching, what's stopping the old Jack from showing up?" Jack stopped walking when he was close enough to see the sweat on Travis's forehead, close enough to smell the fear hiding under all that fake calm. "Nothing's stopping him," Jack said. "He's just not here anymore." Travis laughed, but it came out shaky. "Sure, tell yourself that." That's when Jack heard it, a soft whimper from inside the van. Then another. He glanced past Travis and saw movement in the shadows, a small shape pressed into the corner of a cage that hadn't been unloaded yet. A dog, maybe a beagle, shaking so hard its whole body rattled the metal bars. Travis saw where Jack was looking and took the chance. He bolted, not toward the road, but toward the tree line beyond the silo, boots slipping on the loose gravel as he ran. Jack's body wanted to chase him down the old way, to grab him by the collar and slam him into the dirt. His hands even curled into fists for a half-second. But he didn't move like that. Instead, Jack stepped sideways, fast, and put himself directly in Travis's path, blocking the narrow gap between the van and a rusted fence post. Travis skidded to a stop, chest heaving. "Get out of my way." "No," Jack said. "You don't understand. If I don't leave now, I lose everything." "You already lost it," Jack said. "The second you decided stealing people's pets was worth more than doing right by them." Travis's eyes darted left and right, looking for another way around. There wasn't one. The fence ran too far in both directions, and the ditch on the other side was too deep and muddy to cross fast. "Move," Travis said again, his voice cracking now, less like a threat and more like a plea. Jack didn't move. He kept his hands open at his sides, kept his voice low and steady. "There's a dog in that van scared half to death. You're gonna stand here and wait with me until the people who can actually help him show up. You think I care about some dog?" "No," Jack said. "That's the whole problem." Travis lunged sideways, trying to shove past him, but Jack simply shifted his weight and caught his arm. Not hard, not violent, just firm enough to hold him in place like a man holding a door shut in a storm. Travis struggled for a few seconds, breathing hard, cursing under his breath. But Jack didn't let go, and he didn't hit back. I spent half my life letting anger control me, Jack said quietly, right next to Travis's ear. I'm not giving that power to you. Travis stopped fighting. Maybe it was the calm in Jack's voice. Maybe it was just that he had nowhere left to run. Within minutes, the sound of tires on gravel rolled in from the main road. Sarah's car came first, followed by two more, lights flashing but sirens quiet. Out here in the empty countryside, there was no need to announce anything. Ray, Bear, and Doc pulled up right behind on their bikes, having heard the call go out over the radio. Sarah stepped out first, folder still tucked under her arm, though now it was thick with statements and evidence. She looked at Jack holding Travis steady, looked at the open van doors, and gave a small nod, like she'd expected exactly this. Travis Cole, she said, walking forward with handcuffs already in hand. You're under arrest. Jack let go the moment the cuffs clicked shut, stepping back and finally allowing himself to breathe. Doc was already moving toward the van, checking on the frightened beagle and two other animals hidden further inside, a pair of kittens curled together in a cardboard box. Bear helped lift the cages down gently, murmuring soft words to calm the shaking animals. It was Daniel who arrived next, parking his old truck at the edge of the road and walking up slow, his face pale but steady. He stood in front of Sarah and the small crowd gathering behind her. I want to say something, Daniel said, his voice cracking but clear. I helped him, not because I wanted to hurt anyone, because I was lonely, and he made me believe I was saving these animals instead of stealing them. He looked at the recovered pets being carried gently to safety. I was wrong. I should have said something sooner. I'm sorry. The days after Travis's arrest felt different for Jack, like waking up in a town he had lived in for years, but was somehow seeing for the first time. It started small. A woman named Mrs. Patterson showed up at his garage with a pie still warm from the oven, her old terrier mix trotting along beside her on a leash. She didn't say much, just set the pie down on his workbench and hugged him so tight he nearly dropped his wrench. He was my husband's dog, she said, her voice thick. Before he passed, I thought I'd lost the last piece of him. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Thank you, Jack. Thank you for bringing him home. Jack didn't know what to say, so he just nodded and told her the pie smelled wonderful. More families came after that. A young couple with two kids who had been crying every night since their golden retriever went missing. An old farmer who thought his barn cat had simply wandered off for good. Each time, they found Jack at the garage or stopped him on the street. And each time, they looked at him different than they used to. No more crossing the street when they saw him coming. No more clutching their kids a little tighter when he walked by in his leather vest. Bear noticed it too. You feel that? He asked one afternoon, leaning against the garage doorframe, arms crossed over his big chest. People are looking at you like you're one of them now, not like you're something to be scared of. Jack wiped grease off his hands with a rag, not quite ready to believe it. Feels strange? Get used to it, Bear said, grinning. You earned it. Even Sarah stopped by one afternoon. No folder this time, no notepad. Just her, standing in the doorway of the garage with her hands in her jacket pockets. I wanted to say I was wrong about you, she said. At first, anyway. I judged you before I knew you. She held out her hand. You did right by that little girl, and by this whole town. Jack shook her hand, feeling something loosen in his chest that had been tight for a long, long time. Eli and Lily visited almost every day. Lily brought him drawings of the puppies and kittens they'd rescued, each one labeled with names she had picked out herself. Eli liked to sit on the stool by the workbench and ask Jack questions about motorcycles, about engines, about anything at all, just so he could keep talking to the man who had saved his sister. "Are you going to get another dog?" Eli asked one day, swinging his legs off the stool. "Maybe," Jack said. "Haven't decided yet." "You should," Eli said firmly. "Every hero needs a dog." Jack laughed at that, a real laugh, the kind that came easy now instead of feeling forced. About 2 weeks after the arrest, Jack decided to drive out to the county animal shelter, the same one that had taken in most of the rescued pets while their owners were being found. He'd heard from Bear that Daniel had started volunteering there, showing up every day since the day he confessed. Jack found him in the back kennels, sleeves rolled up, hosing down a row of empty cages, sweat on his brow despite the cool afternoon air. Daniel looked up when he heard footsteps, and for a moment neither man said anything. "Didn't expect to see you out here," Daniel finally said, turning off the hose. "Wanted to check on you," Jack said. "Heard you've been coming every day?" Daniel nodded, setting the hose aside. "Feels like the least I can do. After everything." He glanced toward the kennels, where a few dogs paced and wagged their tails, waiting for attention. "These animals didn't ask to be part of what happened. Figured I owed them something." Jack walked closer, looking at the dogs through the chain link. "You didn't have to keep showing up." "I know," Daniel said quietly, "but I wanted to." They stood there for a moment, watching a young shelter worker walk a limping mutt down the hallway, the dog's tail wagging despite its injury. "You know," Jack said, "took me a long time to believe people could change. Really change, not just talk about it." Daniel looked at him, something like understanding passing between them. "You believe it now?" Jack looked around at the shelter, at Daniel's calloused hands, at the dogs who trusted him despite everything. "Yeah," Jack said. "I do." The town square had never looked so alive. Strings of paper lanterns hung between the old oak trees, swaying gently in the evening breeze. Tables covered in checkered cloths lined the sidewalk, piled high with fried chicken, cornbread, and pies of every kind. Someone had set up speakers by the gazebo, and music drifted over the crowd, mixing with laughter and the smell of barbecue smoke. Banners stretched across Main Street. One of them, painted in bright letters by the elementary school kids, read, "Thank you to our hometown heroes." Jack stood near the edge of the crowd, feeling out of place in a clean shirt instead of his usual leather vest. Bear elbowed him in the ribs. "Relax," Bear said, grinning. "Nobody's gonna bite you. Well, except maybe that kid over there with the barbecue sauce all over his face." Jack managed a small laugh, but his chest felt tight. He wasn't used to crowds looking at him like this. Not with fear, not with suspicion, just looking at him, plain and simple like he belonged. Doc came up on his other side, holding 2 paper cups of lemonade. He handed one to Jack. "You earned this, you know. All of it." "Feels strange," Jack admitted, taking the cup. "Never had a town throw a party for me before." "Get used to it," Ray said, walking past with a plate of ribs already half eaten. He didn't say much else, just gave Jack a small nod before disappearing into the crowd. Mayor Collins stepped up onto the gazebo steps, tapping the microphone twice before it crackled to life. The crowd quieted, turning toward him. "A few months ago," the mayor began, "this town faced something we never expected. A young girl went missing. Families lost pets they loved like family, and it would have been easy for all of us to lose hope." He paused, looking out over the crowd. "But some folks didn't lose hope. Some folks went out and did something about it." He gestured toward Jack, then Bear, Doc, and Ray standing nearby. Daniel stood a little apart, looking uncertain until Sarah, standing beside him, gently nudged his shoulder forward. "These men remind us that heroes don't always look the way we expect," the mayor continued. "Sometimes they wear leather vests and ride motorcycles. Sometimes they're the quiet neighbor we never really knew. But they showed up. And because of them, Lily Carter is home safe, and so are the animals that were taken from families all across this town." The applause that followed was loud and long. Jack felt his ears burn, unused to this kind of attention, this kind of gratitude. Children began to gather closer, tugging at their parents' hands, pointing at Jack's motorcycle parked near the curb, its chrome gleaming under the string lights. A group of them, no older than 8 or 9, walked right up to him, no fear in their eyes at all. "Is that your motorcycle?" one boy asked, eyes wide. "Sure is," Jack said. "Can I sit on it?" another asked. Bear laughed from behind him. "Looks like you got some new friends, Jack." Jack knelt down so he was eye level with the kids, answering their questions about the engine, the size of the wheels, how fast it could go. He watched their faces light up with excitement instead of fear, and something warm settled deep in his chest. That was when he saw Lily making her way through the crowd, Eli trailing close behind her, both of them dressed in their nicest clothes. Lily's dark hair was tied back with a ribbon, and she held something small in her hands, wrapped carefully like a treasure. "Jack!" she called out, waving. He stood, brushing off his knees, and walked over to meet them. Eli grinned up at him, missing one of his front teeth now, a new addition since the last time Jack had seen him. "We made you something," Lily said, holding out the small bundle in her hands. "Well, I made it. Eli helped pick the colors." Jack knelt down again, taking the small object from her hands. It was a bracelet, woven carefully with blue and green threads, the same careful stitching he remembered from the one Eli had shown him that very first day in the diner. Stitched into the thread, in small, careful letters, were the words, "Heroes come in all kinds of shapes." Jack stared at it for a long moment, his throat tightening. "I wanted you to have it," Lily said softly. "Because you believed us, even when nobody else did." Jack slid the bracelet onto his wrist, right next to the leather bands he always wore, and looked up at the 2 kids standing in front of him, at the crowd behind them cheering and laughing, at the town that had once crossed the street to avoid him. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Jack felt like he was exactly where he belonged. The road stretched out ahead of Jack like a long gray ribbon, cutting through fields of tall grass that swayed gold and green under the afternoon sun. He leaned into the curve of the highway, the engine of his motorcycle rumbling steady beneath him, a sound he had known his whole life. But something about it felt different now, lighter somehow, like the weight he had carried for so many years had finally slid off his shoulders somewhere along the way, though he could not say exactly when. The wind pushed against his jacket as he rode past the old wooden fences that lined Miller's farm, past the creek that ran under the stone bridge, past the turn that led toward the diner where it had all started. He did not stop there today. He did not need to, but he slowed just enough to look at it as he passed, the same faded sign hanging above the door, the same gravel parking lot where a soaked and terrified little boy had once run through the rain and changed everything. Jack thought about that day often. He supposed he always would. He remembered how the diner had gone quiet when Eli burst through the door. He remembered the fear in the boy's eyes, the way his small hands had shook as he gripped Jack's leather vest like it was the only solid thing left in the world. "Sir, they kidnapped my sister in a red van." 6 words that had cracked something open in Jack, something he had kept locked away for years. Back then, he had been a man trying to disappear, a man who fixed motorcycles during the day and stayed quiet at night, hoping the town would forget who he used to be, hoping he could outrun a reputation built on old angers and old mistakes. He had believed that was the best he could do. Stay quiet, stay out of trouble, let people think what they wanted to think. But Eli had not seen a dangerous man that day. He had seen someone who might help. And that simple act of trust, from a scared 7-year-old boy who had nowhere else to turn, had pulled something out of Jack he did not know was still there. The road curved again, and Jack passed the wooded turnoff that led to the old farm where they had found Lily, safe among the frightened animals she refused to abandon even in her own fear. He thought about her voice that day, soft but steady. I knew somebody would come. My brother said good people always show up. Those words had stayed with him longer than almost anything else from that whole ordeal. They had carried him through the hardest part, the part where his own past had turned against him, where the town had looked at his leather vest and his tattoos and decided he could not be trusted, not even after everything he had done. He remembered how that had felt, like being erased, like decades of trying to be better meant nothing at all. But Eli had not given up on him. The boy had walked into his garage with that same bracelet in his hands and reminded Jack of something he had almost forgotten. You came when nobody else did. That means you're not the bad guy. A 7-year-old had said it plain and simple, the way only a child could, cutting through all the noise and doubt with a truth Jack needed to hear. Jack flexed his fingers against the handlebars, feeling the woven bracelet Lily had made him, still tied around his wrist alongside his old leather bands. Heroes come in all kinds of shapes. He had read those words so many times now he could recite them without looking. The garage came into view up ahead, its metal roof catching the afternoon light, the old gravel lot out front already filled with familiar shapes. Bear's truck, Doc's motorcycle. Ray leaning against the fence with his arms crossed, watching the road like he always did. And there, sitting on the front step with a plate of cookies balanced on her knees, was Lily, laughing at something Eli had said beside her. Jack slowed as he turned into the lot, gravel crunching beneath his tires, and cut the engine. The quiet that followed was different than the quiet he used to know. This one was full of voices calling his name, full of Eli running toward him with his gap-toothed grin, full of Bear's booming laugh, and Doc's steady nod, and Ray's small smile that said more than words ever could. Jack swung his leg over the bike and stood there for a moment, letting it settle in his chest. This was what he had been looking for, all those years running from who he used to be. Not distance, not silence. This. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story, and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.